Of course, is related to some of the new reporting, Tyler, that you've been doing. The new piece you co-authored for the New York Times focuses on the growing tensions within MAGA world, carrying the headline, "The Populist versus the Billionaire, Bannon, Musk in the battle within MAGA." The fight here, of course, is about globalists and how they view the economy. That's part of it. You write in part this: the long-standing animus between Mr. Bannon and Mr. Musk encapsulates a key tension at the heart of Mr. Trump's Make America Great Again movement. It pits those, like Mr. Bannon, who want Mr. Trump to carry out a more fully populist agenda against ultra-wealthy interests, epitomized by Mr. Musk, who occupy key positions in the president's orbit. Mr. Trump has made clear he wants to keep both men and their allies within his movement, but Mr. Bannon's vocal disdain for Mr. Musk has been noticed by the president. In mid-February, the president told Mr. Bannon that he wanted him to lay off the attacks on Mr. Musk and for the two men to sit down privately. That's according to two people familiar with the comments. That meeting has not happened yet. It's not clear when or if it will. So, Tyler, we know that Bannon, still an outside advisor to the president. They speak occasionally. His War Room podcast is listened to by many in the West Wing. It seems like he's pulled his punches on Musk. He's hit him a couple times, but not the full-throated way that we know Steve Bannon can when he wants to go after someone. So tell us a little bit more here about the state of this relationship. Do we think that meeting's ever going to happen?
Yeah, that's a big question, John, and it's unclear that it will. And I think one of the things that's really interesting about this relationship and this fight between the two of them is what it tells us about Donald Trump and the broader Republican Party and the movement and Trump's effort to try to keep both of these sort of opposite poles inside the coalition, inside the tent, and sort of tamp down on these attacks. But, as you noted and read from the piece, these two men have vastly different views. And one of them, I think, comes down to sort of the ideological drive of them. Steve Bannon has been preaching about populism for many years, has sort of been at the vanguard of that movement to move the Republican Party in that direction. Elon Musk is not somebody who was even a Republican a few years ago, definitely not a Trump supporter. During the first term, I heard from people that heard directly from Elon Musk, who was very critical of Trump's approach on tariffs, on sort of his disdain for the globalization and the global economy that many of Elon Musk's businesses depend on. Now we've obviously seen this full transition of Musk into someone that is a full-throated Donald Trump supporter. And so it's just interesting to observe this dynamic unfold, particularly against the backdrop of the economics that we're talking about here and how, Trump's tariff policy is going to impact billionaires like Elon Musk, who are quite concerned about not just investment, but the stock market as well, which, as many guests have mentioned, is a huge concern of Donald Trump. He ran in 2024 on this economic argument, blaming Joe Biden for inflation, blaming Joe Biden for a whole cost for inflated goods across the board. And so as we see costs go up here in America, it'll be quite interesting to see not just how Donald Trump responds, but how Republican politicians and their voters respond as well.
It's crazy, John Heilman, that we just showed a picture of Donald Trump, Elon Musk in the background, and J.D. Vance. And you feel like asking, which one of these do not belong? Because you had J.D. Vance a couple of years ago in his little Silicon Valley vest talking about how much he loved San Francisco and Silicon Valley. And, multinational, globalist. The same thing with Elon Musk. And so the friction here isn't just made up. This isn't just like somebody trying to gain power. I can think of few people less suited to help run the MAGA movement than the two I mentioned, like Elon Musk. I mean, the whole populist fight is against globalists, billionaires, multinational corporations, monopolies, which a lot of these tech companies now basically are monopolies. And they don't believe in nationalism. They believe they are bigger than any nation, that they are their own standalone nation state. So again, I'm just not sure how these two forces are balanced in the MAGA universe moving forward.
Well, look, I mean, Joe, that tension between, which is embodied by the tension between Elon Musk and Steve Bannon, who've been fighting publicly, and in some cases viciously, now since December, when the first kind of debate about H-1B visas came out. It became clear that Elon Musk was like every other person in Silicon Valley who believes deeply in immigration, especially for high-skilled workers, and Steve Bannon, who wants to basically stop all immigration in the United States. They started fighting then. The tension has ebbed and flowed in public, but in private, it's been intense. And this reporting by Maggie and Jonathan Swan that put Elon on his back foot, Bannon immediately seized on that. I think this is in the long run, this is one of the great tensions governing the Trump 2.0 era, and also about kind of the key choices that Trump has to make. And I got to say, but Elon Musk is an incredibly rich guy, although he's getting less rich by the day. The man has lost $180 billion off of his net worth.
Whoa.
As the Tesla shares have tanked. That's even big money to you, Joe. $180 billion in net worth. That's some serious business there. And like as that has started to happen, Bannon, he's very rich. He's got control of X. Those are big assets to Donald Trump. But I got to say, how long Elon Musk is going to want to continue to see people attacking Tesla dealerships around the country, lighting Tesla charging stations on fire, painting swastikas on the sides of Tesla dealerships, and seeing the stock price plummet that way, impacting his personal wealth. I don't know. And the other thing I know is you never count out Steve Bannon in one of these fights, because he is the embodiment of the MAGA base. And without the MAGA base, there is no Donald Trump.
Yeah, well, I don't know if Donald Trump would say that, but yeah, don't count out Steve Bannon in a fight over, what lies at the heart of MAGA. And Tyler, I'm just curious. Of course, the vandalism at the Tesla dealerships absolutely horrifying. It's terrible and should be condemned. And I don't think stockholders of Tesla are as concerned about that as they are about the fact that his politics is really getting in the way of his bottom line. You look at I guess in Germany and France, sales have plummeted by 75%. His stock has fallen 45% over the past month since he really started getting involved in the Doge activities. His approval ratings plummeting, especially among younger Americans. How much longer is he going to stay in this fight?
That's the question a lot of people in Washington, Joe, are asking. And it's interesting. I've talked to some close Bannon allies and acolytes to write this story. And one of the things that some of them told me was that they saw maybe some benefit in Elon Musk as sort of a heat shield for Donald Trump, that a lot of the animus and criticism would be targeted at Elon Musk, and he would be able to carry out some of the president's agenda without the president taking a hit in terms of his own approval rating. I think the meeting that my colleagues Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan reported on last week about the contentious meeting between Elon Musk and the cabinet secretaries that John just mentioned showed that maybe that heat shield idea is not working as well as some of these Republicans had hoped for, and that the negativity and the criticism directed at Elon Musk is reflecting poorly on Republicans. We've seen Republicans shy away from town halls across the country because of some of these, outbursts from constituents who are very concerned about the cuts to government services that they're already seeing. So I think, obviously we know Donald Trump is very concerned about his approval rating, his poll numbers, and it seems unlikely that he will allow Elon Musk to hurt his own brand and politics. We've seen sort of this, Donald Trump trying to tamp down on any concern or speculation that there's fighting between the cabinet. We saw he had a meal with Marco Rubio and Elon Musk over the weekend at Mar-a-Lago, trying to push back against the idea that there's dissension among his top aides. But it is very clear that Elon Musk is having an impact on Donald Trump's presidency, and how long Donald Trump will be able to withstand that is a big open question.
New York Times White House reporter Tyler Pager, thank you. His new reporting, of course, online right now, and Tyler's new book, 2024, How Trump Retook the White House and the Democrats Lost America, comes out in July. Tyler, thank you.
And just for the record right now, this morning, Jonathan Lemire passed along to me. Right now, Marco Rubio and Elon Musk texting are tweeting sweet nothings to each other on X. How exciting. I want to ask two people on this show that actually know an awful lot about economics, about where the investing class is on Donald Trump. Steve Ratner last week wrote a piece in the New York Times saying, while they're concerned about some of the chaos, most of his business friends still are supportive of Donald Trump. But you look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal, wary investors are starting to play defense. We're reading it absolutely everywhere, concerned about the growing chaos. Andrew, what are you hearing on the street?
Oh, I think there's absolutely a wariness. I mean, the question is this a temporary situation, as the president has tried to describe, or is this a longer-term issue where we could, as Zanny said, move into a recession? That is where we are right now, which is if these tariffs, I think, continue apace and the uncertainty remains, it's almost impossible to see this not turn down. If things reverse themselves and maybe, Trump does all sorts of other things to try to boost the economy, which I think is still a possibility, things could go the other way. So I don't think people know necessarily. But, Trump is right about this. In the short term, there is going to be pain.
That is certainly true, Andrew. I'm probably slightly more pessimistic than you are, in that I think everything we've seen in the last few weeks of how he behaves is that he can't resist the tariffs as threats of them, as tools of threats, and he believes in them. So I think there's going to be uncertainty. Even if there isn't a barrage on April 2nd, we won't know if there'll be more after that. I think this is not something that's going to go away. And I think that uncertainty, coupled with an even greater degree of uncertainty on his foreign policy, which we haven't talked about, but which for those of us in Europe is really freaking us out, means that I think people are generally, the uncertainty has soared about the U.S. economy. And so that's one of the reasons why people are taking their money out. Foreigners.
Editor-in-Chief of The Economist, Zanny Minton Beddoes, and CNBC's Andrew Ross Sorkin, thank you both very much for coming on the show this morning.